Cloud. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first session of the 2021 Global Learning FIU-DC Transformation Contest Virtual Fly-In with STEMConnector. We are proud to have student-moderated sessions. So I'm going to get out of the way and turn it over to our student moderator, Maria Camas, who will both please introduce herself briefly and then introduce our guest speakers from STEMConnector so that we can go from there.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Maria Camas. I'm a recent graduate of Florida International University. I'm a proud STEM student. I received my bachelor in biological sciences as well as a Bachelor of Arts in Natural and Applied Sciences with a pre-health concentration. And today we are so happy to have some program directors from STEMConnector and the Million Women Mentors program, which I'm going to introduce right now. Let me share my screen. Okay, could everybody see the PowerPoint thing? Yes, okay, perfect. So today we have Miss Abbey Myers, who is the head of research at STEMConnector, where she leads their efforts to produce actionable insights for members and the field through research and analysis. Abbey has a passion for tackling complex social problems through innovation, collaboration, and evidence-based practice. She earned her Bachelor's of Science in Health Sciences from Furman University in Greenville, South Carolina. We also have Mr. Ted Wells, who has almost 2 decades of professional experience in the fields of education, public policy, and business. His educational background is in economics and Romance languages and international affairs. Professionally, he has worked as a teacher, ran a small business, and worked on public policy initiatives in education, economic policy, and corporate government strategy. Over the last 8 years, Mr. Wells helped launch and operate STEMConnector, an organization that brings together different stakeholders with a shared interest in advancing the STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math workforce, with a particular focus on groups that are historically underrepresented. His work focuses on corporate and post-secondary outreach in STEM, as well as understanding and communicating about developments taking place in STEM policy discussion on the national and state levels. This role has given him the opportunity to travel extensively to communities across the United States and meet a vast array of interesting people while doing work that he finds meaningful. It is a pleasure to meet you both. I know you guys had to share some information about the program, so I will pass the floor down to you guys.
Thank you, Maria. Abby, I'll let you kick it off.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Maria. Thank you guys so much for having us. It is such a pleasure to be here and lovely to meet you all. To start us off, I just have a quick slide deck that I wanted to kind of go through with you all. What this is essentially our foundational research and work and the frameworks within which our work is developed. And let me, good old technology, right? Let me see if I can get this to display correctly. Apologies.
I just enabled screen sharing for everyone in case that was any of the issue there.
Thank you so much. Okay, let's try this. Can everybody see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. And then where is my presentation view? Okay, nope, I did this wrong. I'm sorry, y'all. 1 second. Because I can't see my notes now. You'd think after a whole year in pandemic, I'd have this figured out by now, right? But good old technology. All right, let me try this one more time. Okay, do we have it? Fantastic. Thank you guys so much for hanging in with me. Again, so my name is Abbey Myers. I am the head of research for STEMConnector. I'm sure most of you have not heard of us. Maybe none of you have heard of us, and that's totally okay, because we are going to talk through today what we are, what we do, and some of the initiatives that we have going on. Right from the start, though, I want to just let you all know that a few things about us that I think will help kind of put some of these things in context, right? So number one, we are a membership organization, and that membership is an enterprise-wide sort of model. What that means is that our clients, our customers, are organizations. They're not individual people. We, of course, work with individual people and individual points of contact within those organizations. But the work that we do, the research that I produce, all of this is aimed at entire organizations and leaders to make those sorts of changes and actions in the STEM ecosystem. In addition to that, most of the work that I produce, it intentionally has an employer lens to it. So I'm often building the business case for why these organizations should care about STEM talent development, why it's beneficial to them, and why they should take action on these issues. So I think you're gonna see a lot of that as I talk through these concepts, and just wanted to kind of make you aware of that from the start. Another thing that I just wanna kind of point out from the beginning is that, our core mission is to build a more diverse, sustainable, STEM-ready workforce. And we look at that mission as something that is rooted in the concept of collective action. And that's really the core of what we do. And where this comes from is, unfortunately, it's from a crisis. It's a STEM talent crisis that our society has been living through for many years now. This comes from a variety of levels. Students aren't seeing themselves in STEM jobs. Communities are struggling to equip the next generation with those key STEM skills, and all the while companies can't hire or retain nearly enough people with STEM skills to meet their needs. It's been about 20 years, 2 decades, since the National Science Foundation originally adopted the acronym STEM to draw attention to the growing need for these skills in the workforce. But 2 decades later, and we haven't seen a lot of change. And if anything, the problem is kind of getting worse. Despite years of effort in this area, it's increasingly more difficult for employers to fill STEM roles. Again, this is kind of that business lens that a lot of our work goes, it is filtered through. But according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, STEM jobs are projected to grow at more than twice the rate of all jobs between now and 2029. Meanwhile, right now, and for several years now, roughly half of all major companies are hiring for the exact same 39 roles. And most of these are STEM roles. Think software developers, computer systems engineers, data analysts, cybersecurity experts, et cetera. And I think the frustrating thing is that these STEM jobs are associated with higher wages, with lower rates of unemployment, and better insulation from economic shocks like we've seen with COVID-19. But alarmingly, less than half of STEM degree holders in the workforce are opting for non-STEM jobs. So clearly this is a really complex problem with a lot of layers to it, and we're losing talent at every stage of the pathway. And this is what the slide that you're seeing now kind of demonstrates this. As students are getting older, we see expressed interest in STEM dwindling year after year. By high school, less than 1/3 of students expressed interest in a STEM career. And within just that cohort then that goes on, they say, yes, I want to persist in this, I want to pursue this, make it through high school graduation, hope, maybe onto college. About half of those who originally enter into a STEM major end up leaving for a non-STEM track or dropping out of school altogether. And okay, even once we've made it past that point, right? We've got a cohort that has those STEM degrees, they've entered into a STEM job, they're ready to go. About half of them, again, are opting to leave their STEM career between 5 and 10 years later. So it's a really big problem. It's really complex with a lot of work to be done here. But we at STEMConnector believe that this isn't a problem that should be faced by any one person or one entity alone. Instead, we believe that this is better solved through that collaboration, that collective action approach that I mentioned earlier. So we represent a network, again, of organizations that are all, looking to reach the same shared vision of building, attracting, and retaining a more diverse and sustainable STEM workforce. And this gives you just a brief kind of preview into what some of those organizations look like. And my colleague Ted will talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. But we really do look at this from, again, a collective action ecosystem approach. So within our membership are major corporations, but also 2- and 4-year post-secondary institutions such as FIU. As well as K-12 school districts, nonprofits, learning organizations, and even some government agencies such as NASA. And together, we're all collaborating to help solve these complex challenges. So the next few slides, I'm going to just walk very briefly through our foundational research piece called State of STEM and sort of the framework that we approach this work in. And there's 3 big takeaways that I want you to have from this. The first, it's not one STEM talent gap, it's actually 5 nuanced gaps. Second, it's not one actor, but an entire ecosystem of actors. And then finally, it's not one solution, but many solution sets at scale. So starting with that first one, right? It's not one talent gap, it is 5 nuanced gaps. And this comes from research that our research team put together. It involved interviews with hundreds of practitioners, surveys with students such as yourselves, as well as a thorough review of the literature and the research out there. And all of it culminated into these 5 nuanced gaps. They are the fundamental skills gap, the belief gap, the post-secondary education gap, the geographic gap, and the demographic gap. And I'll go through those one by one real quickly here. So, we hear it time and time again in the literature, in working with practitioners, in talking to teachers, basically everyone are all saying the same thing. There are these basic STEM skills that young people need to succeed as lifelong workers and active citizens, whether they're in a STEM career or not. These fundamental skills are so important to all of us, right? Yet not enough young people are developing that foundation. So employers are constantly telling us, right, that the average student coming out of high school or college isn't ready, doesn't have all the necessary competencies they need to succeed in the working world right away. But on the flip side, employers aren't always clear or appropriately defining the skills that they need, making it difficult for K-12 and post-secondary institutions to properly align their curriculum to workforce needs. And then to complicate the matter even further, these new higher level STEM skills that employers want, like analytical thinking and complex problem solving, they're really hard to build into traditional education models. The other thing I think kind of goes along with this is that we're seeing what gets defined as a STEM skill getting broader and broader. For example, digital literacy and technology skills. These are quickly becoming necessary for everyone to have a basic understanding of. The second gap, the belief gap, recognizes that young people and the adults around them hold incorrect beliefs about the aptitudes or traits people need to belong and thrive in STEM. Starts with young people. So students often hold incorrect beliefs about their own STEM abilities and self-efficacy in STEM subjects like math. For a lot of people, there exists this idea that you have to be innately good at something like math, right? That math and science fields are only for gifted or for, the nerdy students. And it's simply not true, right? These STEM skills, like everything else out there, can be learned and mastered. It often just takes practice, and it takes opportunity to practice those things. Not only that, but like we've already talked about, these skills are necessary for a foundational level for everyone to really be a lifelong, active citizen and worker, regardless of field. Looking at the other side of the equation, employers often hold incorrect beliefs about how academic performance and credentials relate to job success. So some of the largest corporations we work with, they tell me, yeah, we know logically and empirically that a lot of the STEM jobs that we have don't really require a bachelor's degree. But then on the flip side, you look at the job postings, right? And there's, organizations like Glassdoor do analyses on these all the time. And what do 75% of entry-level STEM jobs require? A bachelor's degree. So, there's this disconnect, right, between what people think comes along with that credential and what skills they're actually looking for. Not only that, but students often have a very limited knowledge of what a STEM job looks like, and they believe only certain industries offer STEM jobs. And sadly, many students, especially young women and students of color, don't feel like they belong in STEM, often because they've never seen someone or they don't know anybody that looks like them in a STEM role, but also because the media in general often portrays STEM students or workers as conforming to these very stereotypical models. So with the belief gap, we know that not only does representation matter, but also there's a growing need to expose students to careers and opportunities in STEM earlier and earlier on. So our third gap, the post-secondary gap, is where we acknowledge that the new knowledge economy requires credentials beyond that high school diploma, but not enough young people are earning those credentials. Now, this relates to a couple of things we've already talked about. The first being that, again, many employers, for better or worse, still require a bachelor's degree for a lot of entry-level STEM jobs. But even when we're, kind of talking beyond that, looking at roles that don't require that bachelor's degree, we still see that simply not enough young people hold credentials, right? Be that a certification, an associate's degree, anything along those lines, past that high school diploma, and thus haven't been able to develop some of those higher level STEM skills at the level that they need to be successful in the workforce. Part of the problem here too is that job seekers and employees face challenges to lifelong learning. The biggest, of course, is cost, but also the need to balance that learning with working full time, with taking care of family and other commitments. And finally, once again, we have this issue, as we already talked about, of those credentials being misaligned to employer needs, which is just creating a lot of confusion for educators, job seekers, and talent development teams alike. The fourth gap, the geographic gap, acknowledges that hubs of economic growth are often located far away from large concentrations of qualified job seekers or far from population centers. So, you may have a whole bunch of talent that's being developed in your local area, but if you aren't located near a major area with STEM jobs like Silicon Valley, right? Like New York City, Washington, D.C., or a similar hub, more likely than not, there's not enough high-paying jobs to go around in those communities. On the flip side, though, for more up-and-coming economic hubs, think like Texas, Minnesota, Wisconsin, there are a lot of jobs available, but they're out of reach for the local workforce. That local workforce doesn't have all of the skills and credentials that those employers are looking for, so they're pulling talent from other places to come into that area. So again, there's this mismatch. And then finally, our demographic gap, which acknowledges the disproportionate participation in STEM jobs based on race, gender, and income. And this is despite decades of knowing that this is a problem and focus on diversity and inclusion. And as we already talked about, the STEM demographic gap is closely aligned to that belief gap, right? But it's also aligned to the achievement gap. Bias and historic inequity remain embedded in our systems. And I mean, this kind of looks like, a self-fulfilling prophecy after a while. Tax dollars fund public schools, resulting in lower income areas with fewer taxes, having fewer resources available. And on average, those students having less access to those higher level STEM courses and quality preparation. So that leads to these students being less likely to gain admission and scholarships to post-secondary institutions. And even for those who do get there, a lot of them are, statistically speaking, less academically prepared for those collegiate STEM courses. So they're more likely to drop out of their STEM major or drop out of school altogether. Because there are fewer women and students of color going into work, in these STEM careers, or as well, we can talk about later too, women and people of color are more likely to leave a STEM career even after they've started it. This all cycles back around. Those K-12 students are, again, not seeing anybody that looks like them in STEM. They don't know anybody that works in STEM. And then they don't have that innate belief that, like, oh yeah, I can pursue this and thrive in this as well. So unfortunately, without any intervention, we're going to continue to see these issues perpetuate themselves. So it's a big problem, again, like we've talked about, but there's hope because none of us actually have to face these issues alone. It's not one single actor that is responsible for tackling these complex problems, rather the entire ecosystem. And at STEMConnector, we think about this in 3 sectors: the K-12 education sector, the post-secondary pathways sector, and the employment or workforce sector. All 3 sectors influence each other and they interact in a variety of ways. And by focusing on those interaction points and building understanding between them, we believe we can create cross-sector collaborations that make the most impact. And of course, these sectors don't exist in a vacuum either. They're influenced by this broader ecosystem, including technology, policy, macroeconomy, and the media. And all of these forces play an important role. And when leveraged strategically and effectively, they can help move that needle towards a more STEM-ready workforce. And then our third big takeaway, right? It's not one single solution that will bridge these STEM talent gaps, but rather many solution sets at scale. So efforts from every sector and numerous actors in the STEM ecosystem are required to expose students to STEM, spark that first interest, right? Engage them in meaningful experiences, inspire them to persist even when they're in those tougher math and science courses that maybe they're not as prepared for, right? It's also assisting them in earning those post-secondary credentials, making those pathways available. And then finally, once they're ready, recruiting them into these exciting, fulfilling, economically fruitful careers, and finally retaining them for the long term. All of these solutions need to be deployed, and by doing so, again, at scale across all of these different organizations and through cross-sector collaborations, that's where we see the most impact. So that's all of my slides. So at this point, I will turn it back over to my colleague, Ted, to kind of talk a little more about, again, who our membership is, what we do, and all that. So take it away, Ted.
Awesome. Thank you, Abby. Great job, as always. So when Abby and I were talking about how do we relate, to y'all what we do at STEMConnector, I think it's important to understand the challenge that we're trying to solve. So just a quick, is everybody on here undergrad? Okay, any grad students? Okay. And is anybody here a STEM major? Okay, Maria, yeah. So, but you don't have to be. I think that's the one thing to take away is made sure to put in my academic background. I majored in international affairs in grad school, and then I was an econ and romance language major. To work in this STEM field, I think it's important to realize that you don't need to be a STEM major. Because I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we do at STEMConnector, because that is our business. So we are a for-profit organization. STEMConnector is not a 501c3. Really doesn't have anything to do with whether you do good in the world. In my opinion, whether you work for a 501c3 or a for-profit organization, it's really how your taxes are filed. And the ownership of your organization. But that's a long debate, maybe over a drink or sometime, but we are not we're not an organization that we are membership based. We have as Abbey articulated, I think very effectively, a clear social purpose and mission. And so just as you're investigating careers, doing a career that is doing good in the world also can be a career that is working for a for-profit entity. Yeah, So I do want to say that State of STEM, Dr. Rosenberg was one of our presenters or informants. And then also he spoke at an event we did a few years ago in DC. Eric, I think you were there, right? With Tata Consultancy Services in the DC office. So
I remember we did our public-private partnership event at the old space.
exactly. Yes, and that was him. So we've done a lot of collaborations. I will also say, just in a little bit of background as to the partnership between FIU and STEMConnector. First, we do have internships available and research assistantship type opportunities. Abbey is often looking for folks, and so is our marketing and communications team. And hopefully you'll hear about what I do in the client services side, which is the work that we do that is directly interfacing with our members and trying to leverage the great work that Abbey, our marketing and comms team are doing, and our project managers are doing. But the reason I know Carlos Becerra very well. I've worked with him for a long time. He runs the DC office, and just was continually impressed from what I was hearing out of the Obama administration when we started STEMConnector, about the work that FIU was doing to engage students in STEM fields and retain them, particularly students from underrepresented backgrounds. So, and then the more I've learned about FIU through the years, the more I see FIU is a really transformative institution in this space. So just know that it's not an accident that, or that, it was just a good sales pitch or whatever. We cultivated FIU. We talked to them. We picked FIU because we saw a lot of innovation at your school. So something to be proud of. I've often been accused of being the biggest FIU fan for never having gone there. So I've been to your campus. It's really awesome, and both campuses, the Biscayne Bay as well, and work also with the hospitality school, which we believe is a big STEM school in its own right, just not the type of STEM that folks think of. So, Abbey kind of went through a little bit of this. I'm just going to walk you through our membership deck, just so you understand kind of what. I'll try to keep my eye on cooking is chemistry. That's right, Eric. And a lot of the foundational skills that Abbey talked about earlier, the fundamental skills. We've used sort of STEM as a foundational, a STEM like competency, STEM literacy as a foundational input into a lot of non-STEM professions. So as Abbey alluded to, this is we look at how do we get students into STEM. You have to start early, and that is a big core belief of our membership, is that if you really want to transform outcomes over the long run, you have to transform the system. And so there's a lot of opportunity in this field for engaging students early on in their academic trajectories, making sure that they are getting high quality exposure and instruction in STEM, and that they're also being excited and engaged. We don't want to have students feeling like, oh man, this is like my vegetables, if they don't like vegetables. And then also we have to create pathways and on-ramps into STEM fields for students. And then from the employer side, we, employers often don't look at, FIU, I think, is a school that a lot of major employers are looking to because, oh, wow, it's the largest Hispanic serving institution, and that's the demographic that we want. And then they're getting in and saying, oh, wow, well, there's a diverse student body at FIU, and these students really know what they're doing. And they're great, and we have them come and work for us, and we like them. So schools that, FIU is relatively new school, is now, on the top list of a lot of employers that we talk to across the country. So it's a time that people are looking at how they change their recruiting practices, and also looking at two-year schools, like Miami-Dade or Broward in your neck of the woods, but also, in DC, like Nova, Montgomery College, all these two-year schools, which are developing, helping to train students to be in the workforce as well, are viable sources of talent. And then the other piece that we see, it's like we can do only so much when you go to work for a company, but the company has to create, the employer has to create an atmosphere that employees want to stay in. And so that's kind of how we view this whole space. The other piece that we're looking at a lot of too, almost in the is in the adult ecosystem is that, you know what, like a lot of people are in jobs that just aren't gonna exist anymore. They're getting automated away. And those folks need retraining. And so how do we deliver that retraining? And it is the purview of 4-year and 2-year institutions in particular to do that work. And how do we get folks back into the STEM economy? So there's almost a feedback loop for folks coming back in as well. So this is kind of, I think we covered this before. Abbey's gaps, the state of STEM, this framework is really critical. We believe it's informed through evidence. This framework is not important thing, I think, with the gaps. And I just think this is like vegetables, again, good vegetables. These are sauteed, delicious. Is that these are informed through evidence. These are also not, and they don't exist in isolation. So, you know, you can have a skills gap situation, a belief gap situation, and a geographic gap all together, you know, and often that is the case. So as you look at things, don't be afraid to think of, and we can provide you all with a copy of the State of STEM PDF at the end of this call, but that's a really good foundational piece. And regardless of where you wind up, you know, in working in the STEM, in this sort of industry of STEM, which when we started STEMConnector a decade ago was very small, which has grown quite a bit. There are a lot of opportunities. So if you talk about our model and how we engage clients, we look at insights. So those are the insights that Abbey and her team produce. And also we look at influence. We have a network of stakeholders who receive our communications. It's almost 20,000 folks throughout the country. So we have a platform that we can communicate to. And so our members really like to leverage our network to help amplify their voice and influence in this space. And then also the other piece is folks are interested in making connections that really are valuable for them. I'll give you a quick example. So one of our member companies is based in the upper Midwest and upper West kind of, and they were making an investment into, well, their CSR, their foundation team, wanted to invest in the science center in their community. They went to their CEO, who in light of the last year and the impact of you know, all the social justice movement, said, you know, we really need to make sure that these investments are addressing underlying issues in social justice. And this was for like a maker space, right? So an innovation center kind of space and a fab lab type thing. And so they came to us and they said, well, we really want to do this, but we don't really know how to frame this. We'd love to have some idea about how others are doing this. Well, that's a big thing. So we were able to connect them to a grantee from the Department of Education who's been building an innovation center in their neck of the woods in California, as well as a science center in the Northeast that is a science museum that is actually in the process of developing a statewide innovation hub. So we were able to kind of facilitate knowledge sharing across the country in a way that really was quick. And so that kind of access is really important. That access, in order to facilitate that right now, requires a lot of market knowledge, which our team has. And that's a big part of what we do, is we kind of keep track on what's happening in the world of STEM. And also in business, because we have to understand the larger trends, right? So that's kind of what we do, is insights, access, and influence. And that's the engagement model. The insight, Abbey went through some of the resources that we provide there. This is our member group. So accessing this group, you can see there's like very much some household names here, you know, Intel, 3M, BP, Chevron, Verizon, Walmart. Also some innovative 4-year and 2-year schools. So this network is really a key piece of the access, but we also have a much larger network of stakeholders that we tap into as well. And then our marketing and communications, we recently released an ebook focusing on food and agriculture is STEM. So our friends at the Chaplain School contributed to this work about some of the great work they're doing to engage students. We will be releasing our next book in June, focused on how STEM saves the planet. These are kind of geared at students who are maybe interested in STEM, but they don't see how STEM is going to really help them help tap into bigger issues in the world. So These are kind of helping them understand hidden career fields or bigger issues. So how STEM saves lives, questions like that. We also lead a national network called Million Women Mentors. And so Million Women Mentors is a national network. We have, I think it's over 40 states now that have Million Women Mentors chapters. We have chapters globally as well. The idea of Million Women Mentors is really to, at the base, is how do we increase mentoring for women and girls in STEM? And really overall, how do we get more students access to high quality mentoring opportunities? And then how do we also provide a platform for organizations who are committed to this work to share best practices, to connect with each other, and to work in partnership with each other. So this has been a really, about 7 years we've led the Million Women Mentors Network. We run sort of the national aspect of the national platform, host the national conference, and then our regional networks sort of engage on our own, although we do convene the states on a monthly basis to discuss the work that they're doing. Ideally, the reason that companies are interested in Million Women Mentors is that they want to get their employees out in the communities. They view their employees as the biggest input into making a difference, not just the checks that they can write. We also lead a program called Day of Design. So we have a proposal out. We actually, I believe, are partnering with Florida International University right now on an ongoing project with a large employer who is looking to lead an innovation challenge. And really what they're trying to do is help. I mean, the reason that they've asked us to help them with this is they want undergraduate students in areas where they have high demand to realize that they have really cool opportunities as a STEM employer. Additionally, they are also interested in helping to raise the to get to know some of these students and potentially hire them as interns or whatever during the summer, or finding opportunities to bring students on. So we also do work in the K-12 space as well, where we've worked with NASA to bring NASA employees into classrooms to connect with students to help them. And this is not just astronauts. This is helping understand the opportunities that are at NASA for work. So that's our Day of Design platform. And we have a full year of events. I will tell you, as any organization over the last year that has focused on engaging a network of folks, it has been challenging because we have not been able to do that in person. We've done our best virtually, but I think we all agree there are shortcomings to this medium as a way to engage people in meaningful ways. And I think that's a big part of what one does in this sort of space around supporting a network. And there's a lot of opportunities in Washington, D.C. that are networks of employers, networks of professionals, networks of folks, for whom around immigration, around, where industry folks are interested in reforming key practices. And ours just happens to be this STEM space. I view STEM as a driver of innovation. Every industry is is leveraging some type of STEM. Look at the mRNA technology that was able to help eradicate COVID, and is continuing to do that, and how that type of innovation has been accelerated by the input of technology. So we see that there's a lot of opportunities for engaging, for STEM to be an innovator. And then we also see that there is a huge opportunity in the fact that folks, as Abbey pointed out, are underrepresented in STEM fields. And so how do we broaden participation through strategic engagement? So I will stop there, and that's kind of what we do. I hope that makes sense, and I'm happy to, if it doesn't make sense, then I'm happy to provide any kind of clarifications.
Thank you very much for sharing a bit more about the organizations. I guess now we'll begin our question and answer session. I wanted to ask, how do STEMConnector and the Million Women Mentors work directly with federal and state governments? Do they influence policy or?
So it's a good question. We do not work directly from the policy standpoint. We do cover policy and keep our members informed about policy. We are not an advocacy organization in that sense. If I were to say that we were not exploring advocacy as a potential engagement, then I would not be telling you the truth. I think it is something we look at. The STEM Education Coalition is kind of takes the mantle in that, and then a lot of organizations, representing different constituencies like electrical engineers, mechanical engineers. Those organizations, are saying, the government needs to dedicate more resources to supporting these entities. So that's kind of the we are adjacent, and Abbey and I are both in Washington, D.C. Our company used to entirely be here, but we aren't anymore. But I think, that for Abbey and me, and Abbey speaking for myself, is an important part of why I'm in D.C. is because, being near the intersection of policy and practice.
Awesome. I also wanted to ask, what is the role of effective communication and mentorship for both of these organizations? And also in your own career?
I can start that one. I would say that absolutely communication is so critical to all of this because, for all the reasons I already covered kind of in my section of the presentation, there are all of these conflicting and incorrect thoughts and beliefs out there about what does STEM look like, what does a STEM job look like, what does an individual working in STEM look like, that just are simply either outdated or were never true to begin with, right? STEM is seriously, whatever way we want to tackle this, we want to tackle it economically. All right, about 67%, right? 2 out of 3 jobs are in some way supported directly by STEM skills, right? About 1 out of 3 jobs are directly in STEM. And that's taking a very narrow definition, right? A lot of our data sources out there take that very narrow definition, which is why, I think we're actually undercounting how important and how, ubiquitous these STEM skills are now out in the workforce. And again, I think it's important that people understand that because, like I said, STEM jobs are associated with higher wages, lower unemployment, as well as more insulation. And often for a lot, especially like tech jobs, the folks that are in them report some of the highest, job satisfaction as well. Yet in those same groups, we have, demographic groups like women, like people of color, like people from low income backgrounds who are shut out a lot of the time, that face way more barriers. And that shouldn't be the case, right? So we need to be able to communicate about this effectively so that everyone has that change in perspective, right? About who belongs, who should thrive, who should be included, and who should be supported in that, right? And mentorship is such a big part of that because, it's the best practice, which is why it's one of those solution sets, right? One of the many that we need to deploy at scale, which is why we have an entire arm, an entire movement of STEMConnector that is surrounding mentorship. Because, again, if you don't see somebody that looks like you, or you don't know somebody that you can talk to that works in these fields, it's harder to get that, to see yourself in it as well and to see the path forward. I was fortunate enough to have a father and a grandfather who were both scientists. And I was fortunate enough to have a father who encouraged me, right? I remember being, probably 8 years old, and I had to do a report on a scientist, right? And of course, I'm going to all those old white men that we know about. And he's like, hey, how about Marie Curie? I had no idea who she was, right? And it inspired me. I was continuously inspired by him throughout my life, but I was lucky to have him, right? That wasn't a choice. That was just a fortunate accident, right? So where mentorship really plays a big role is by connecting people, being able to pass on that knowledge, that inspiration, those pathways, especially to those folks who don't have those opportunities already or have those additional barriers, right? So I'll leave it there. Ted, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I mean, I just in terms of effective communication, yeah, it's everything. You know, this is so much of this is one thing that's interesting with STEM is, you know, I heard Michelle Obama talk about this when she was talking about in her book, like, or no, it was in her podcast about government, and she's like, I don't see a marketing budget in here, and like that's a challenge. Is that folks? I was talking to the National Science Foundation program director recently, and they, you know, they do so much great work at National Science Foundation. So if you ever have an opportunity to work there in any capacity, it's just a fascinating place. One of the real gems, I believe, in our federal government. But they do a lot. They fund a lot of great work, and it's an extremely innovative place. It gives Abbey and me a lot of insights into the work we do because of the data collection that they fund, et cetera. But one thing they find is like they do like, oh, we did marketing on this, and that's all we need to do. And a lot of even companies think about like STEM careers, like you have to always be marketing them to students. You have to always be marketing the importance of this field to students. And so communication and marketing are really critical, I think, to problem solving.
Thank you very much. I will now pass the floor to Prachi, who has a question.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me? Yeah, okay, yeah, I have like 2 questions, but more one. The first one is like, what is your advice and how you're in this team, like major like advice for people that when they graduate, what do you think that they should do to pursue the career and not being afraid or switch their majors? And the second question is like how you find those like reliable sources to make sure that when people post something, is it true, how you do the research? Thank you.
Can I ask, just for a follow-up to your second question there, is there anything specific you're talking about, like reliable information about careers in STEM or something else?
Oh, when, for example, like all the data that you have is because you did a research. And usually like when I go to articles, like I need to make sure, because I come from another country, that is reliable, like is which area is going, like Democrat, Republican, or like, oh, is this person have a bias? It's a personal opinion. So how would you evaluate that?
Gotcha, okay. So I think, you know, addressing your first question first, right? Advice. I would just say, you know, first of all, I think the biggest piece of advice I have is if you are in any way interested in STEM or anything for that matter, practice is going to be more important than innate ability. That is pretty much across the board, right? So the more you can get opportunities to practice, whether that is through take more courses, just keep trying, right? You know, find those work opportunities too, I think is the other really big piece of advice that kind of fits in here. For employers, from their perspective, right? I hear this time and time again. They are looking for skill sets that honestly, it's nearly impossible to get them through just traditional education, right? And it's unfortunate because that, in my opinion, right, it shouldn't be on the individual. It shouldn't be on you guys to build these things alone, right? There should be, but that's why, you know, organizations like FIU that have opportunities for those internships, you know, or wherever you can find an opportunity to get that on-hand experience, like go for it. That's going to be worth everything, right? I would think you know, in terms of information, what I would say is that, you know, and I think this is getting a little outside of my area of expertise, to be perfectly honest, but what I would say is that be a critical thinker always and check sources. So, you know, if somebody posts something on Facebook and says, oh, I got this from here, right? Go check it out. Where does this come from? How did they get this information, right? Do you know, I know people throw that out there like, oh, do your research, but like actually do your research. And by that, I mean, check the sources, right? Go back and read. All right, well, you know, you're pulling it from this study. Where did this study come from? What was the methodology? Who funded it? Think about those kinds of aspects, right? Take everything with a little bit of a grain of salt. And the other thing is, like, you know, for you personally, I would say build your repertoire of sources in a way, right? So For us, for our information around like STEM jobs and things, I always go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I go to the National Science Foundation, and I go to primary research a lot of the time, right? Maybe if you see something that was in a news article and not from a direct source, take it with a grain of salt, right? Go back to that direct source whenever you can. And if somebody doesn't cite a direct source, all right, that might tell you something that's probably not going to be as reliable. So I hope that answered the question. Ted, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think just to the other question, I think the reliable source piece, you know, I think one thing around is in this space is that the things do change. And it's important to recognize, like, you know, employment market, just think about the last year, right? The world changed a lot. And so things, you know, it's important to always look at things in the lens of, this came from 2011. Well, there's some value there, but is that useful? And then I think, like, looking for, you know, reliable, you know, people can always interpret data in different ways. And that's interesting. You did have another question I wanted to make sure we got to around, because around like your major and choices or something like that. Can you just refresh me on what that was?
Yeah, the question was like, what is your advice for people that are like pursuing STEM majors and like they feel like they should change their major or go to another career path? Yeah.
There's for STEM majors?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm always pro stay in STEM, but I also think it's important to look at your major. If you know, if gainful employment is an outcome that you're looking for upon graduation, you know, this post-secondary education gap that we talk a lot about, it's pervasive. So you want to make sure that the skills that you are developing and that you're cultivating in your field of study have some use in the workforce. So things like, you know, yeah, understand being a programmer, probably not, you know, in the cards for you if you're not doing it at this point. Who knows? You can still do like boot camps or whatever. But having, you know, technical skills, technology skills to be able to analyze data, or, you know, to be able to use those productivity applications that we use in the workforce today, not just in big companies, but across the space. Graphic design skills. I think if you are looking to kind of go into a business like STEMConnector or into a nonprofit, flexibility and versatility are really valuable. Being able to do a lot of different things. You know, I remember when we were starting STEMConnector, I was doing graphic design, spreadsheet management, you know, sales, client engagement, you know, like all kinds of different things. And so, you know, the more that you can be flexible, nobody, you know, there's not very many employers anywhere anymore where you can be like, I do this and that's it. You kind of have to be able to be somewhat flexible and adaptable. And I think the one thing to bear in mind too is employers, if you are not immediately able to, especially in sort of this space in sort of social sciences, applied social sciences, they don't expect you to be an expert, but they expect you to be able to try and to learn. And those are the skills I think that are really important.
Yeah, I want to reiterate that lifelong learning, you know, always be willing and open and taking opportunities to learn. Because like Ted said, like we've talked about, the skills economy changes so rapidly, no one can keep up, right? And so being able to just always be learning and taking in those new opportunities is going to help you so much, regardless of what field you go into.
Amazing. We have one final question from my peer, Laura.
Hi, thank you, Maria. Yeah, I wanted to ask about changing, or I guess transitioning to a STEM career, coming from a non-STEM, you know, bachelor's. Like how do you do that, like for graduate school? Like what are some advice that you may have on that tip? Because I think that can be a great way to like kind of solve that gap, because, you know, once you go through higher education and you kind of prove yourself that you're able to go through it, I think it is an easier transition than coming from high school and, you know, all of that.
Yeah. Oh, Ted, do you want to take this one first?
Well, I was just gonna say that I did not have a STEM background going into this. I was a teacher, and then coming into this space, I went to graduate school, and that was kind of my hard reset. I don't think you need to do that if you're making that shift, but I do think it's really important. I think to go out and talk to people who are in the field that you want to work in. That's the biggest piece of advice. Find out what people do, schedule informational interviews, and then start to identify kind of what you want to do. And you can do that like while you're in a job or whatever. But I think that's the best way, is really get out there and see what people are doing, and then kind of backtrack and see how they got there. I think you'll find that a lot of people kind of backed into careers by accident, and really love them. So, also I think that's the other piece, is like, be prepared for things to kind of fall in your lap sometimes, because you are open, and it's making sure to hold on to the things that those opportunities that you really like. Sometimes you're like, well, I'm on this path, and I know this is a waste of time. That's how I felt at the beginning of this, and then I was like, wait a minute, this is really interesting. This is a really important issue, and then it all kind of fell into place. And that was like, and I've been doing this 10 years. Maybe that was like the first year and a half. I was like, whatever, this is like and then all of a sudden it's kind of become something real. Sorry.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd add to that is, I think the vast majority of people don't actually know what they want to do with their lives, right? And like Ted said, things fall in your lap, right? I never imagined I would be here, to be honest. I came out of high school thinking, oh God, so a little bit of background. I went to a science and math high school. And I came out of that thinking, oh my God, I'm terrible at this. I should never do STEM, because, I was struggling through pre-calculus, and meanwhile, my peers were doing like differential equations in 11th grade, So I think that, and then, lo and behold, no, I had those skills and I had that passion. I just took it in a slightly different direction, right? What I would say is the great thing about today's world is the access to information. So if you want to pivot your career at any point in time, if you want to investigate, going into a STEM career, the first and best thing I would say is just find as much information as you can, figure out what those skills are, and there are ways to get them, right? Whether that is, like through an online course, through a certification program, through a boot camp, through going back to school, and the community college route, especially for adult workers or people who are looking to kind of do that pivot, is a great option that is a little more affordable, right? There are all these opportunities out there, and I think that a lot of the times they get overlooked, or people don't recognize that it can be a valuable learning opportunity. So if at any point you were like, actually, I just want to make a pivot here, go online, find a course, find some references, find a forum where somebody else is doing the exact same thing, and then practice it, right? If it's coding, if it's data analysis, download some data off of a government website. There's, lots of publicly available data sets, and just start playing around with it, right? If you want to try visualization, Tableau Public, it's out there. You can use it, If you want to try doing like statistics or other higher level stuff, like R, is a package out there that's free. There are a lot of resources out there. And the first thing I would say, just like go search for it, right? Go see, like Ted said, what are other people, how did they get there? How can I learn from that pathway? And what are the learning opportunities that are around me, and take advantage of them? That'd be my advice on that one. Also, I saw Ted dropped his email address in the chat. I'm going to drop mine in as well. I know we're coming close to time, so I just want to let everybody know you're more than welcome to reach out anytime. And yeah, thank you.
And I'm sure, Abbey's on the research side. I'm on sort of the client service, customer service side, basically. We have colleagues in marketing and comms who I'm sure would be willing to connect with you, or the events planning side, or the project management side. Our colleague Bethany does a great job with a lot of our clients, and we'll be working hopefully with FIU students in the fall. So we've got other colleagues who are all very committed to this space. Eric asked me, and I thought Abbey the work she does has broad interest just in terms of understanding this work. And Abbey, has a really interesting way that she came into this. But we have a great team here that, there's other folks that we can connect you to as well.
Thank you for your answer. I think it's really relevant, the piece about connecting with people and looking for those resources outside, because I think everyone can make a change and everyone can better themselves and keep learning. So yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah. So,
Thank you guys for your time. I really appreciated everything about interdisciplinary education and how you sort of came to your careers. And it was just very insightful to begin the fly-in session. And thank you also to my peers for asking questions.
And
thank you all very much. Good luck. Enjoy this, and please stay in touch.
Yeah, thank you all so much. Please reach out anytime.
All right. Bye now.
My own thanks to Ted and Abbey, but also a thank you to Maria for being a fantastic moderator and a fantastic model for our future moderators this week.
And Maria, great job. Sorry to get you my bio last minute too.
It's okay, don't worry. Thank you so much.
All right, take care.
Bye.